Amazing. And we're going to get started straight away today. So let me just get my screen happening so that I can see all of your beautiful comments as I go. I hope that you've all started a really amazing Friday. Here we are, amazing, all good to go. So I can see there's a couple of you on live already, so please do say hello, let me know that you're here. I think we're pretty good to go now. Amazing, amazing. Just let me know actually that you can hear me and that everything's kind of working well. It looks a bit frozen, maybe not. Okay, I think we're good. So today was not going to be about the topic that I'm going to speak to today. I had a plan of something totally and completely different, and it just kind of worked out that my birthday fell into the middle of this week. And so what I experienced yesterday as my birthday, it came through very, very strongly this morning that hey, Kerry, that I really needed to bring this into this container. So it does mean that the contents of the next couple of days have shifted a little bit, but I think that this has come through with such beauty, and it is such an incredibly important part of the New Earth Woman to speak about sisterhood and what it actually is, and how to cultivate it, how to call it in, how to be the best soul sister that you can for your sisters, and how to also be the best soul sister for them. And so, kind of both ways, and how to kind of call them in and move away from anything that is ultimately not that. So please let me know if I've been freezing, because I don't know if it's my screen. Good morning, Maya. I'm not sure if it's my screen or whether there's actually an issue with the feed. So just let me know if you can, please, anybody watching live, that we've got a good connection. Not that I can do much about it, but so the reason that I wanted to talk about sisterhood today was because, as you all know, it was my birthday yesterday, and what I got to experience on my birthday was very, very, very special. Now, I'm in Melbourne, which means we are in lockdown, we're in isolation, and so my birthday plans changed significantly from what they were going to be to what they ended up being. Hi, Samantha. And what it ended up being really had me reflecting, not only last night, but also this morning, on the shift and the changes that have happened throughout my life as I've been kind of embodying more of these essences of this New Earth Woman, and what it means in my reality, what it means in my experience, and how by showing up as this version of me, as this New Earth Woman, what actually is created. And in the past, for my birthdays especially, I would notice all of the people that I didn't hear from, and I would feel disappointed that things didn't kind of go the way that I'd sort of hoped that they would, or I would feel like maybe people didn't put as much of an effort in as what I put in. And if any of this is resonating as far as your birthdays goes, this goes way beyond birthdays, but I just feel like the birthday was such a good example of this yesterday. I would love your feedback. Is this something that you've experienced in the past when it comes to your own? I know some people don't celebrate birthdays in the same way, but to me, it's a really beautiful recognition of all of the kind of things that I've had and done and have to celebrate for the previous, not only 1 year, but all of the years before, and what's to come. And in the past, a couple of years ago, I was getting so disappointed with the way that my birthdays would go that I actually set a reminder in my calendar that was going to happen every single year for the rest of, with no stop date, to remind me to make sure that I had really considered what it was that I wanted to do and how it was that I wanted to experience. And it's just really interesting how it's kind of shifted even from that kind of intention that I had set a couple of years ago. I have always been the one that kind of goes out of my way to make other people feel special. And like I said, in previous years, I kind of struggled with the idea that didn't really receive it in the same way. And I wanted to share with you today a couple of the recognitions that I've had through my own experience with sisterhood, and what is different based on the kind of journey that it's taken me to get here, and how you can cultivate deep, sacred sisterhood connections as well. And so what I want to share is that yesterday, like I said, I was expecting it to be just like an average kind of birthday because I was stuck at home. And not only did my mom go like completely and totally out of her way to make it extra special, she had like bought all of this amazing food and champagne and did all of these things in order for us to kind of have a really special day. But what was she does that every year, but what was kind of the most mind-blowing experience for me was that in the evening last night, a couple of my girlfriends had kind of planned together this idea that I would have like a Zoom party with a few of my like very close girlfriends. And I was like, I knew that I was going to catch up on the Zoom with like 2 people, but it ended up that when I came on, there was actually 5. And there was an intention for this party that we would not only get to like, you know, have a nice time kind of connecting and catching up, but also that they were going to shower me with love, and they were going to tell me all of the things that they love about me. I'm going to cry. All of the things that they find that I like represent for them, and what it is that our friendship has brought and made available to them. And it was probably one of the most overwhelming things that I've ever experienced. And to be able to receive that was really incredibly special. And it really did make my day beyond anything that I could have ever conjured up myself. And the kind of reverence that I have for my sisters these days in comparison to how it was in the past has really, really completely shifted and completely changed, and is so different. It looks so different. And so, you know, when I woke up this morning, I was going to talk about this totally other topic, and I was like, you know what? I need to honor this. I need to talk about sisterhood. And it's a huge, huge part of the wise warrior woman and the archetype, which is one of the new earth woman archetypes that has like really come through me recently, which is, you know, a 5-month offering. And in that we go deep into sisterhood. And it wasn't really going to be necessarily a part of this week, but like I said, it's just come through, and this is what I'm sharing with you today. And so what were my old friendships like? Oh man, I have always struggled with friendships. Like since I was in primary school, I had, you know, all of the regular kind of girl drama in primary school, like best friends and not best friends and all that kind of stuff. But in high school, it kind of really escalated for me. And I was like very rudely kind of exited from my really big group of friends, you know, on the last day of school in the year. And so I had to spend the whole, you know, next 6 weeks of summer break, like, you know, without any friends. And it was really, really damaging to me and the way that I interact with women. And what it meant was over the years in the journey, I had really beautiful friendships and I had lots of amazing friends, but there was kind of lots of little toxic kind of things that were playing out. And then some of them were really not toxic at all, but just very surface level. And we had so much fun, and like I honor every single one of those friendships in the past, and I still love those women so much. But the thing that is kind of in the old way that has changed now is just the depth of the connection, the depth of the ability that we have to see each other. And when I say see each other, I mean like piercing through the skin into the heart, like completely next level style of connection. And so in the past, you know, friendships would always have these kind of little pieces of like competition or comparison. Oh my God, comparison. Not only is this like a past thing, I've seen it kind of come up even now, like a 35-year-old woman. And this is not shaming that. It's a totally normal part of our human experience. But it's like when we can start to recognize all of these pieces that are playing out with our friendships and with our soul sister friendships, then we actually make available a completely different way of relating with women. So in the old kind of templates of friendships, and when I say old, these are not old, they are present now, right? These are the types of friendships that I've had to really, hey Zoe, thank you. Thought I would like go bold today. These are the kinds of friendships that are totally alive and kicking right now. It's just about recognizing whether it's the type of friendships that you desire to have or not. And there's no shame on if this is part of your experience right now. It's just like, let's look at what the higher timeline is. Let's look at what's available, because this is part of the New Earth Woman template. This is part of what is actually available in the New Earth, which is a completely different looking experience for women relating with women. And so what did I say? I said competition, comparing, judgment, surface level. You know, the connections and the conversations were based often around other people or around kind of what's happening, as opposed to like really getting to the depths of the heart and the kind of souls of the women that we interact with. And so this was kind of my experience for most of my life. Like, yes, I've had some really beautiful friendships that have stayed with me for a really long time, who I still am very close with. And there's, you know, over the last kind of 2, probably 3 years, things have really significantly changed. So before they started to change, I found myself really craving deep connections. Now, it wasn't just with women at that stage, it was also with men. It was in my, you know, my relationships previous to that had been really beautiful and really loving, but there was not really the depth that I knew that I had available within me. It wasn't being reflected back to me. And I was craving to have like real, true soul sisters, women that were just able to not only support me, but that I was able to like kind of crack myself open to and be held. Because one of my fears that I had cultivated over all of these years around friendships was, when I show myself, people leave. When people see the true me, they won't like me anymore, right? And like, I would love to hear like who resonates with some of those stories, because I don't think it's just me. I think it's totally an old, you know, friendship template that's been part of the past that we get to start to clear away and move into a new kind of direction and a new way. And so around about, I think it was 3 years ago. What are we in now? August. No, it's July. Carissa, it's July still. It was your birthday yesterday. It was 2.5 years ago. I was reading it in summer. It was January, and I was reading a book called Rise, Sister, Rise. Now, if you haven't read this book, I highly recommend it. And the reason why is because of what I'm sharing with you today, is that what it created for me was a completely new vision of what soul sister friendships looked like, what soul sister friendships felt like. And I knew that that was a thing, but I had never kind of created the vision for myself about how to cultivate it, how to call it in, and how to kind of create it in my own life. And so, thank you so much, Samantha. You're so beautiful. And what happened when I read that book was that a new opportunity was created for me through the awareness that something like that was available, and that I had to do what I needed to do in order to kind of shift and move and kind of clear layers that was telling stories other than that, and really kind of move into a place where these women would be coming into my life. And through reading that book, everything kind of changed, because it was not long after that I called in. It was actually only like 1 month later, like within the next 21 days from that intention setting, from that sitting with what it meant to have soul sisters, sitting with what it meant to have these really deep connections where like women really came together in a completely different way to the ways in which I had known in the past. And in only kind of 3 to 4 weeks, I remember I went to this event and I was sitting in this room, and I ended up just, you know, coincidentally sitting next to these two women who ended up becoming very, very close friends of mine. And I remember sitting in that room thinking, this is so interesting. These two women that are near me, I can feel them. It's like there's this, like, you know, the universe has put us in the same place in order to cultivate these new kinds of friendships. So I knew we were at this event, we were loving the same things, it was very exciting. And it ended up that was kind of the first experience that I had with this really kind of new style of friendship. And it turns out, you know, one of them ended up being a total shit show and didn't end up being exactly what I thought. Although we had the depth of the sisterhood connection, she ended up being very untrustworthy and it ended up kind of being a shit show. But the other one is still a dear friend of mine, and I do see her, you know, sometimes now as well. But what kind of that created a ripple effect where now I have these incredible, miraculous miracles of women in my life that, you know, do things like organizing a Zoom party where they tell me how much they love me. Excuse me. It was very, very overwhelming. And so New Earth Soul Sisterhood, New Earth Sisterhood is all about collaboration, vulnerability, recognizing our own stuff in the friendship and not putting it into the connection, like kind of being super, super mindful when anything's going on for us. Like, is this something that that I'm kind of projecting in, or is this something that is real that we need to talk about? And just kind of being mindful of all of those things. And the most important element, which I'm going to go deep into now, is having an open heart. Having an open heart. We all think, I think, at least before I kind of really cracked my heart open, I thought that I had an open heart until I cracked it open and started to recognize all the people in my world that changed and shifted, and how, like, those that were kind of still a bit guarded were kind of moving out of my life, and those that were kind of really open were coming into my life, and how everything changed. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. My heart wasn't open before, and now it is. And the way that I can tell is because I cry when I think about the soul sisters that I have in my life, and I cry when I think about what they do for me and how they treat me, because we are such, like, beautiful reflections of one another. Samantha says, when we stand in our truth, our soul sisters hold us and lift us up from a space of unconditional love. Exactly. Oh my gosh. And Samantha, I know that you, like, are such a deep, reverent woman who absolutely has these types of soul sisterhood connections, and I really honor you and your heart that you bring to the world and to everybody else. And so when it comes to heart opening, I want to tell you a little bit of story about this too, because this was actually a really big part. Although it was related directly and specifically with men, it actually had a bigger impact on my, just as big of an impact on my sisterhood relationships as it did on my, like, kind of romantic relationships, and what shifted and what changed. And I wanted to share this experience with you because this was actually something that I wanted to go into deeper, but it kind of works and ties in here. And so I'm going to share it here and give you some practices that you can start to cultivate that will help you kind of crack open your heart. So when was it? 2 years ago, not long after I read the Rise Sister Rise book. Actually, it was very soon after. It was only 4 months after that. So not only was I starting to manifest deeper connections with women, I was also starting to manifest deeper connections with men. And this beautiful, amazing, heart-centered man came into my life, and I was so not ready to, like, get in. Like, he was showing up, like, fully ready to, like, step all the way in. And then I was noticing so much resistance. I was, like, kind of like playing these roles that I knew were not going to serve me if I wanted deep connected relationship with this man. And so very, very early on, I started to recognize I felt like there was this big block in front of my heart. There was this, like, steel door that was thick, really, really thick. And it was, like, blocking me from opening up and allowing him to come in. And so what I did was I actually, I got myself, like, a coach. I got myself a support person to help me kind of crack open my heart. And it kind of turned out that I did most of it by myself, but it was still really amazing to have her along the way, because we did some other cool stuff together about like heart opening and what have you. But I recognized very early on that until I was willing to crack it open and allow him in, nothing was going to be what I wanted to be. And I was actually going to lose him if I didn't do that. And so what I did was I started to cultivate the connection with him. And like I said, this can be done with any like friends or whatever as well. And like I said, this is a huge testament to like why I have the women in my life that I have right now as well, is that when I would notice that I was shutting down, or when I would notice that there was like the heart kind of stopping, like, you know, I would see an opening for vulnerability and I wouldn't take it, or I would notice like when we're being intimate that I was kind of shutting down or playing different roles to kind of not be like fully in my body or whatever. And so what I started to do was, with this blockade that I recognized, with this like big steel door that was like literally I could see it was like sitting in front of my heart, and not just in front of my heart but behind my heart as well, was to, as I was lying down, just see the heart and see the recognition of this part of me that was afraid to let somebody in, and just kind of watching it and allowing it to crumble. And I didn't just do this once, I did it over and over and over and over and over again. And mindfully, consciously, in every interaction with that man, was I making myself more available to open my heart, leaning into vulnerability, leaning into sharing who I really was, leaning into speaking my voice, even if I thought that he might not like me in response. And what this made available to me was that, like I said, my sisterhood, my sisters, the women that I called in started to shift and change dramatically. And it was only, you know, within the next year after that, that things just completely and totally shifted. And so I would love to hear from you on the replay or on live. I don't even know how many people we've got on live today. I'm not paying that much attention to the video. But like, how often are you noticing the kind of resistances that you have to like having deep connections? I would love to hear from you if I'm the only one that has kind of struggled with some of these little pieces before. I would love to hear from you around like, what is it that you crave when it comes to the women that are around you? Because in order to move into the timeline where we have the like most to be appreciative for, we have to have the vision for it. Like, we have to be able to see what's possible. And because when our mind is limited to what we have, then, and we're kind of not appreciative of what we have, then there is no higher vision and there is nowhere to go. And so I would love to hear from you in the chat, like in the comments, like, what is it that you crave when it comes to being close with other women? And I'm just going to have a drink. I'm not the only one. Thanks, Maya. I spilled my cup of tea everywhere just before. It's like all over the table. I'll have to clean it up later. Amazing. I'll keep going. So, in order to start to like shift into this different kind of way of, sorry, just my screen bringing up messages and stuff, is to start to pay attention when you shut down. Start to pay attention when there's a wall in front of your heart. Start to pay attention to the little pieces of recognition, and you can only recognize them when you become aware, when you choose to look at them more consciously. Is like, look at your friendships, look at the people that are in your life, women and men. Look at what the dynamic is between you and that person, and start to become really aware of what it is that's playing out between you and them. I used to find that in order to be the best friend that I could, I had to be the helper. In order to gain the validation that I needed to believe that I was enough, I had to always be the one offering stuff to my friendships. It was very challenging for me to receive. It was very challenging for me to allow someone in and to see my vulnerability. I can't even tell you, there is like literally 3 women on this planet that have seen me break down in full vulnerability. And previous, there was like, actually that's not true. Now there is way more, but previous there was probably only 2 or 3 ever. None of my friends up until 2 or 3 years ago had seen the real depths of my soul. And it was because I hadn't been willing to see those parts of myself. It wasn't because they were doing something wrong. It's not because there was something wrong with me to not, like, you know, attract the right types of friendships. It was because I was not willing to be able to be that vulnerable with myself. And so I first had to cultivate this type of connection with myself. And one of the things that this wall in front of my heart was doing was blocking me from receiving. Now, this is like such a major template that is like playing out in women. It's like more in women than in anybody else. But this give, receive flow that's meant to happen, where it's even giving, receiving, giving, receiving, giving, receiving, is like giving, 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 giving. And we've come from this like long history of women that have been so good at giving, but absolutely unavailable to receive. Unavailable. And I'm talking like in the most simplest form, like receiving a compliment, receiving love from somebody telling you that they love you or that there's something amazing about you, receiving money, receiving any type of amazingness into our lives without telling some kind of story about like how we had to do something to get it. And so when we have that blocked channel, and when we're kind of, you know, like me, I'd love to hear from you as well. Like if you've kind of recognized yourself being the helper role, being the rescuer, being the one that's always kind of there for their friends so that their friends can dump all their stuff on them, but it's never reciprocated. And not reciprocated because the other friend can't, but because we can't receive. Samantha says, I'm recognizing now that when resistance shows up in my day, that I can pause and breathe into it and listen to the message. Before, I would just hide away. I'm showing up with more openness to receive and to be in vulnerability where necessary. Yes, this is such a huge part of the process. Recognizing when the resistance comes up. And when it comes to sisterhood and soul sister connections, if we can't recognize the resistance, we will not be able to call these types of women in. There's just, we're not a match. The frequency is not a match. And so when we start to open up to receiving, and to do this, we practice. We practice when someone says, that's a nice dress, instead of saying, oh, I got it for $20 at Kmart, we say, thank you. When your friends create a Zoom call and tell you how much they love you, you say, thank you, received, and literally visualize that loving energy being like sent into your heart, and just allow it to like wash over you and like create this experience. I've got goosebumps all over me just from even doing that, because when we open ourselves up to receive and we crack open our hearts and we allow something in and someone in, our entire world changes. Our entire world changes. In this same relationship that I spoke about with this like cracking open, I had to learn the very, very challenging lessons about receiving. That man wanted to support me and I was unable to let him support me. And in every single moment that he tried to support me and I felt the resistance, I had to breathe, like Samantha said, breathe and allow him to support me without me blocking it. Because let it be very clear, when we don't feel like we are receiving enough, and when we're not getting enough, and when we are not being supported and all those things, it is very, very, very often because we are blocking the receiving. It's not because the people around us are unable to or are not willing to or don't love us. People in relationships, we create habits where we literally block the receiving so often that they just stop doing it because we are incapable. And when I say incapable, only in those moments, because it is absolutely available to every single one of us to find that ability to crack open our heart. Now, let it be also very clear that this is not an easy process. It comes with challenges. It comes with the requirement to be able to get vulnerable. And if we can't get vulnerable, then we don't get to experience the fruits of the vulnerability, which is such divine beauty and unconditional love. Samantha says, yes, it is receiving. That is a huge biggie for me. It's a constant thing that I work with. When we're in that receiving space, it shows us how valuable we are in this world and beyond. Exactly. How are we ever going to feel like we're enough if we can't receive the love that's being sent to us? So the first thing in this process, in terms of like calling in and cultivating these types of soul sister relationships, is to recognize what types of friendships are in our space right now. Look at each one and assess it with unconditional love, not with judgment. Look at it with curiosity and compassion, like we said yesterday with the ego stuff. Look at it and recognize, okay, cool, I can see these patterns. I can see when I'm being the helper all the time. I can see when I'm the one that's doing all the do. I can see when I'm rescuing. I can see that in this relationship, when that person goes to help me, I shut down or I tell them that I've got this. I was the queen of like having my shit together. So none of my friends needed to help me because I was had my shit together. They didn't need anybody. That wasn't the truth. That was just the mask that I was wearing in order to not have to be vulnerable with the women around me. And as I started to crack open my heart, miraculously, I wasn't the only one that felt like that. And we were able to like kind of crumble away all of those barriers, those masks, those doors in front of our hearts that were like stopping us from getting really, really available for what's available. Maya says our childhood is such a big impact on the ability to be vulnerable. We are programmed very strongly. I was the rescuer and I haven't got my glasses on, this is a bad idea. I was always the rescuer and would never allow anyone to help me. I remember a friend on the phone when I was in my 40s telling me, you're the strongest person I know. I burst into tears and thought, no, I'm not. I just want someone to put their arms around me and tell me that they'd take care of me. But every time I needed support, it wasn't there, which is just reinforcing my belief that I have to do it myself. But I wouldn't let that happen. Exactly. And this is the reality. And it's really challenging to come to terms with this idea that we are the ones that are creating the availability to whether people can support us or not. And you're right, it comes from our childhood. And this is one of the topics I was going to go into today, which was about like nurturing that inner child. It's about like, you know, our safety and vulnerability is definitely kind of paved by what was available to us in a child. And if we haven't done inner child work and we haven't recognized those parts of us that find it really challenging to open up, if we were brought up by strong women who taught us all of the really amazing masculine ways to be a woman, then of course it's going to be challenging, not even to mention what trauma makes available to us in terms of shutting down and closing down. We have to have absolutely done the work. And this is part of the New Earth Woman. It's that she has absolutely worked with some of the wounding and really done some of the healing. And although there's still healing available, it's a never-ending journey. The kind of bulk of those pieces are done. She's ready for the new way. She's ready to create a new existence. She's ready to have those stories not be determining who she is anymore. So I wanted to talk about a couple of little pieces of what it is to hold space for your sisters and how we can support our sisters, and how with every single word that comes out of my mouth, I want you to recognize that we have to be able to do this for ourselves first. We have to be able to, like I said yesterday, sit with those parts of ourselves that we don't really like. Sit with those parts of ourselves that are telling us that we're not good enough. Because when we sit with everything that I spoke about yesterday, when it came to the ego and the small self, that makes it available for us to be willing to be seen by other women and men. But today we're talking about women. Today we're talking about friendships. Speaking of, energy is completely and totally unbiased. When you shift these things in your sisterhoods, guaranteed it'll shift things in your like romantic relationships and vice versa. So if you're like cultivating some of these practices in your relationships, that's perfect, because it will make more available for you in your friendships too, and vice versa. So whichever way you've got that you can play with this, then please, by all means, do it with your family, with your whatever, your parents. So I want to talk about holding space and what it is to hold space in a new earth timeline, what it is to hold a space as a new earth woman, as the wise warrior woman, the woman who literally energetically is like placing her arms around her sister while her sister shares something with her that potentially is vulnerable. Recognizing the safety is found first within. And when we are completely and totally safe within ourselves, at least to enough of a degree that we can share out and know that we're going to be okay because we have ourselves, we've got ourselves, we can hold ourselves if the other person can't hold it. It's a really challenging part of the process, finding that safety within. And that was going to be something we're going to go into deep today, but it's been shifted because of this new topic that came through. So I wanted to share just a couple of pieces of what it is to hold space and how it is to support, just to give you a couple of things to kind of start recognizing in your soul sister friendships or in your friendships that are maybe not as deeply connected as what you would desire them to be. So the first thing around holding space is when somebody brings something to us, we want to always hold them in their highest timeline, in their highest existence. See them and meet them in their pain, and also hold a higher vision for them, so that when they are going through it and when they're experiencing some discomfort or some upset or some pain, we can hold space for that and give them the kind of validity that's needed to say, like, what you're feeling is valid, and also always holding the higher timeline for them. Because if we jump into the story with them, and if we jump into the pain that they're in and we kind of encourage it, like, yeah, fuck that guy, and, kind of get into the story, it's actually really detrimental to the shift of that person, because they stay in the kind of experience as opposed to being kind of called lovingly and beautifully back into their kind of highest power, and recognizing the amazingness of who they are, and kind of always holding that piece for them. And so as a practice moving forward, if you want to cultivate these types of connections, it's about looking at the people, first looking at yourself, because you cannot do this with other people unless you have first looked at yourself. Everything that we said yesterday is like the kind of the precursor for everything that we're talking today. If you can't hold space for self, you're going to find it very challenging to have deep connections with other people. If you can't have that deep connection with yourself, it's going to be more challenging to find it with other people, because, like I was saying yesterday, it's like reflections, it's mirroring what our experience is internally in the external. So as we build and cultivate these types of holding space for self, we're able to do it for other people. When we hold ourselves in our highest time, when we hold ourselves in our highest experience, and we see the pain and we allow ourselves to be in it, but we also hold the higher experience, then we can consciously kind of take that bridge, continue to take that bridge. And this is what we do to hold space for other women, is to always see them in their highest and not jump into the problem with them. And we have to be really willing to be seen in all of our facets. And that's not just to see our sisters in all of their facets, but to see ourselves, because they will not see us until we are willing and able to see ourselves. That is the God honest truth. I have absolutely experienced that to the depths of the experience, telling the story that I wasn't seeing in all of my experiences, to coming to a place where I was like, holy moly, people are recognizing all of the amazing things that I do. And it's only because I recognize it within myself. So yesterday is a major precursor for today. And just being really mindful always about what we're bringing into the container, and seeing it as a sacred experience with our sisters, as opposed to just kind of, off the cuff comments and what have you, like being really present and mindful, and being like not distracted. Because if we can't give the presence that's required for somebody to open up, they're never going to open up. That's the same goes for ourselves. If we can't give ourselves the presence with ourselves to open up, how the hell are we ever going to open up to somebody else? I would love you guys to give me some comments in the chat box and let me know how this is landing and what's resonating. And if you have this kind of higher desire for your soul sister friendships, Maya says, I didn't allow myself to be vulnerable until I was teaching my students know more about me than anyone else, including my husband of 48 years. Yeah. That's really common, really common. Thank you for sharing that. And so through this like holding space experience and how we then kind of cultivate support, being really aware of when we're trying to help. Like, what is it that we're getting out of being the helper? What parts of our ego is that soothing or making us feel better? I said earlier, for me, it was always that I felt like I didn't have anything to offer if I wasn't helping. And so I had to be the helper in my friendships because that was the only way that I felt like I was going to be enough. Whereas over the years, as I've let those masks get out of the way and I've cracked my heart open and allowed people in, all of a sudden it's not required for me to be the helper. Because my friendships are like really purely in this like give, receive cycle. We give as much as we receive on both sides of the coin. There's never just one of us giving more than the other. And if that was the case, and this is actually something that I skipped over, but I did want to talk about, is to allow some of the friendships that are not serving us, that cannot or are not able to meet us where we want to be met as we're shifting and as we're growing. We can practice with them, but if they're not kind of coming along with us, we have to be willing to say goodbye. And I can say with my hand on my heart, that is some of the most painful things that we can do, is to say goodbye to some of the people we love. When I say goodbye, I mean just like, you know, gently moving them into like kind of outer circles as opposed to being in our inner circle, because our inner circle is so sacred. The people that we allow to be very, very close to us is sacred. My heart is sacred. It's not just available for everyone. And so over the years, as I have like kind of created like this inner circle of women who I will ugly cry in front of on video when I'm going through it. I am so available to like share the depths of my gritty ego sometimes. Whereas in the past, that would just never have ever been something that I desired to do, let alone that was available. So we have to be really aware about when we're coaching and when we're advising our friends, right? Thank you, Samantha. I'm glad that this is resonating with you. And she says, I'm just loving how you're standing in your wise warrior woman heart space today. Thank you. Thank you so much. I really received that. So we have to be really aware of when we're coaching and advising, when we're stepping into the helper role, and recognizing that isn't our role as a friend. Our friend, our soul sister, like experience, position is to hold space for. And if that person desires some support, then we can ask them, like, you know, what is it that would support you right now? We can ask them questions. We can hold them in their highest and kind of call them forward to that. Yes, of course, we support and we love, but we be very mindful about when we're coaching and advising, because that can actually cause this like distance of, like what I was sharing before, where we're being the helper. And just asking, like, what does support look like to you when you're in a space like this? How is it that you respond best? Like, what is it that I can do that helps you the most? Do you need some words of affirmation? Do you need me to just tell you that I love you and that I'm here for you no matter what? You know, do you need me to ask you some really empowering questions that have you recognize how amazing that you are? Because by me telling you, that's not always going to be the helpful thing for some people. Asking, like, you know, do you need me to just hug you today? Get your friends to tell you how they receive support the best, so that you can step up and be that. And equally be willing to share with them how you receive support the best and what is your best way. Maya says, I have found that people just fade away without me needing to do anything. Yeah, they totally do. Yes, as we go on the growth journey, that absolutely happens. It's unavoidable. Yes, I'm so glad that you like the topic today. Thank you, Maya. So we be very discerning about when we're placing our opinions and when we're kind of sharing what it is that we think. Because when we have our heart open and when we're cracking ourselves open and available for vulnerability, we can actually sit with the discomfort of somebody being in a shitty place. We can just sit there with them and allow whatever's coming through to come through. And with that, that's where we cultivate the really wise woman. Because when we can sit and not only be in it with them, like receiving and holding space for them, but that's when our like true womanly wisdom comes through. Because when we're not trying to fix and help and advise and like, you know, tell them what they should do, we can actually listen to the intuition of our soul that is telling us, maybe there's a little piece over here that if we have a look at might actually help serve you. You know, asking them some questions, some really beautiful, powerful questions. When we jump in and when we add our opinions and we coach and advise, it can have us shut down even more. And I know I've spoken about discernment a couple of times this week, but this is such a major coding of the new earth woman. It is such a major coding of the wise warrior woman. The wise warrior woman can't be the wise warrior woman without discernment, and neither can the new earth woman. Discernment is key, because when we are present and allowing that intuition to lead us and our soul to lead us and our soul to call us forward, as opposed to the kind of egoic parts of us needing to help or whatever, that discernment can actually stop us from playing in that kind of ego field, or just throwing something into the container that's not helpful, or advising when it's not actually in that person's highest for you to give them that advice, because it's self-serving as opposed to being part of this co-creative experience with another woman. And so how we cultivate discernment is the pause, which I shared, I think, on day 2, I think it was, or 3, where we pause and we stop and we go, hang on a second, like, what is this? Where's this coming from? Is this actually going to support this person, or is it going to hinder them? And being willing to share with your soul sisters with love, like with so much love, when there's maybe something that isn't that supportive that they're doing. And you can say, like, I've said this to my sisters in the past, like, you know, just when I've kind of noticed from my own sake, like things that I've done in the past and the ways that I've jumped in, and I've had to share with my beautiful, amazing sisters, I've had to say things like, I love you and I know that you're trying to support me. And when you say this, I find it really challenging because I get stuck in the story unless you can hold me in this higher place. And that is because of the self-awareness that's available, but you can't do that without that self-awareness that's required. And just to like give this kind of one extra piece of a caveat, I grew up with 3 brothers. I didn't have any real sisters. When I say real sisters, I mean flesh and blood, that were birthed by my mother. I do not have any real sisters. I have 2 amazing sister-in-laws, and I have an incredible amount of sisters in my life that I call my soul sisters, that are like, they are definitely closer to me than some of my family. So just wanted to add that in there so you understand that this has been a lifetime of desiring to have sisters. I remember when I was a kid, I locked myself into my bedroom once and put a sign on my door and said, I'm not coming out until I had a sister. Now, if I knew what that meant at that time, I don't think I would put that sign on that door. That is for sure. And, growing up with brothers meant that I have some really amazing qualities of the masculine, but it did make it really challenging to build soul sister connections. And so if that's you and if that's been part of your journey, then I'm sending you love, and I'm asking you to check in with yourself and check in with the wall that's in front of our hearts and behind our hearts, and starting to break it down. And so, like I said earlier, with the practice, it's really being present with yourself, recognizing what's the heaviness on the chest? What is it that's kind of stopping us from opening up and being vulnerable? And also, like I said earlier, this is something that we go very, very deep into in the Wise Warrior Woman. Like, the whole part of creating the Wise Warrior Woman for me was calling in these amazing women that get to cultivate the kinds of soul sister friendships that I have created in my life. This is a desire of the woman that is the Wise Warrior Woman, to have deep connections, not surface level, not sometimes, but consecutive, consistent women that are there through thick and thin, that can see you when you're in your ego and love you anyway. Can see you when you're being a bit of an asshole and love you anyway, because you can love yourself through when you're being an asshole. So, my beautiful, amazing New Earth women, thank you for holding space for me to share this with you today. Thank you for supporting me. Thank you for sending all of your love. Thank you for all of the love that you sent me yesterday for my birthday. It was so beautifully received. I'm so grateful for every single one of you that have shown up for this event. And this is just such a tribute to what it is to have amazing women in our lives. So now I would love to hear from you. What was your biggest takeaway from today? What was the thing that landed the most? What is it that you loved the most? What is it that is going to be different for you moving forward? How are you going to recognize and interact with the resistances that come up for you when it comes to your friendships and with your relationships, family, loved ones, partner? What's going to be different? How are you going to cultivate the higher timeline so that you have somewhere to go? I would love you all, if you haven't already, to read the book Rise, Sister, Rise by Rebecca Campbell. It's such a beautiful testament to sisterhood. It's so powerful. It really did wake me up to a higher possibility. Thank you so much for those of you who have joined me live, and thank you so much for those of you who have watched a replay and are still here. I'm very grateful for you, and I will come back and read the comments and reply. So if you haven't yet answered some of those questions that I just shared, I will come back and listen to read them. Oh, here we go. I've got some coming through now. I still need to figure out how to hold space without getting stuck in the story. Yes, Clementine, this is really, it is a really beautiful skill to start to create. And so it's really good to have the awareness that that's something that you've challenged with, because now as your sisters come into the story, or as you come into the story, you can start to just recognize that you're in the story, and that's kind of the starting point. And then just holding that higher vision. And like I said, we go very deep on that in the Wise Warrior Woman, and I'm really excited to show women how to hold that space through the experiences of the sister circles that we will be having every fortnight, every 2 weeks, I should say. I know that there are people here that don't know what fortnight is. And this English Australian word, I don't think they use it in the States. Samantha says, thank you for you. Deep gratitude for the space. Loving seeing the New Earth Woman's soul, sister love in action today. Mwah. Thank you, Samantha. Received. All right, my beautifuls, if you would like to write those questions down that I just channeled out very quickly before, please do come back, watch a replay, pause it, write them down and journal on them. Journal on what's going to be different, how you're going to cultivate different connections with people. I'm sending you so much love. I hope that you enjoy your Friday, and I will catch you all tomorrow morning, same time, same place. Mwah. Bye.